Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? O unholy night! Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them carol singing's not to my taste, and chuckle when I say choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, "What a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat." I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch. My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek, I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid, and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. My constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, the throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly, casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting brougham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers. Regardless, my initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fug lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudavik's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity. I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year. The gingerbread cookies. The gingerbread cookies. Let's go downstairs and bake some cookies, like Mother used to make. The warm smell sits right at home in your nostrils, invading them like wild axe murderers, hacking and slashing their way through endless miles of human bodies that stand in the way of their inhumane, carnal desires. Shh, but that's too dark. It's Christmas, after all. So let's go downstairs and bake some cookies, like Mother used to make. One step, then two. Ooh, isn't this great? You've never baked gingerbread cookies before? Oh no, because you always thought that you would never be able to make them oh so good, like Mother used to. What did she say she made them with? Some kind of special ingredient. What was it? Was it sugar and spice and everything nice? Was it love? That special ingredient that every mother cooks with because you are their extra special little kid? Oh my, this is exciting. Your heart hammers against your rib cage as you set the oven to... Oh, you don't know what to set the oven to. You've never made these before. Probably 300 will be good. You bend down, spin the dial. But what's that? What the heck? There's already a baking tray in there. You take it out, confused. On it, there's a set of perfectly cut gingerbread men. They wear little black tuxedos with white buttons. Their smiles expose endless rows of sharpened, white teeth. And their wide green eyes watch you intently with their white pupils. In the center, one of them stares right at you, holding a folded-up note in its tiny dough hand. You snatch it from him, not caring about the little man's feelings. To my little boy, my oh my, I can't believe how the years have passed. It seems like just yesterday that whatever secret deity governs this universe sent me to my untimely punishment beneath the earth's soil. I know, I was always so poetic, right? Now enjoy these cookies. I hope they taste just like how Mommy used to make. Love, Mother. Ding. Apparently, 10 minutes pass while you read that short letter. But to be fair, you don't read it once, do you now? You read it time after time until the words start doing tangos in your head as they spin spiderwebs around one another. Now, after it dings, you're supposed to put the cookies back in and start the baking, Mother said. How hot do you bake them? You asked. Hot, very hot, Mother said. But don't they not like being so hot? Oh, these little guys won't mind at all, Mother said. She slid the tiny men into the 300-degree heat chamber. She smiled. There was really nothing to it. Nothing to it. Well, there's nothing to it, you think, as you slide the baking tray in, and as the minutes tick by, their faces change. No more are the artificial smiles plastered on by a woman who would ruthlessly murder them. Now are the faces of men who know their deaths are coming. Smiles that slowly flatten in the corners as 3 minutes turn to 4, 5 minutes to 6, until the red frosting of their mouths fall clean off, and they can't shout for help, just as you couldn't call the ambulance when you're there. Mother started clutching her heart and breathing heavily, minutes after she slid the baking tray filled with small people into the oven for the final time, yelling for you to get the phone, to get up, to do something, and not just sit there as the people cooked in their torture chamber. And then they come alive. One of them pokes its head up, its blank eyes staring into your heart. It's lifeless, dull, unknowing of the infernal fire around it, like you on that fateful night, not knowing that Mother will soon be gone for good. It looks at you, and then it stands on its 2 stubby legs, stumbling as it gets up. It walks to the edge of the baking tray, carefully navigating around its still dead, unconscious friends as they lie down, their backs against the aluminum's sun-hot surface. It looks its friends in the eyes, and maybe it thinks, I'm sorry that I'm here and you're not, and then steps over the edge, falling down into the oven's fiery, incomprehensible bottom. Clunk. Mother? You asked, your body shaking all over. Why was she on the ground? Why were her eyes closed? She may have been asleep, for all you knew. Maybe she was. Maybe. And then they all stand up. They look like an army, all dressed in their uniform suits. One of them peers down and looks at its friend, all dismembered and burned on the oven's floor. It looks more like charcoal than a body. They form a single file line in the middle of the tray. A gingerbread snake, if you will. And one by one, each of them takes turns taking suicidal leaps off the edge. And one by one, you catch their faces as they take their fateful falls. "Stop crying, kid," they all say. "Mother will be okay." Clunk, clunk, clunk. The gingerbread charcoal pile grows and grows until it is a small mountain. In it, you see a face. Mother. And she smiles the gingerbread smile, looking at you. And you can't tell if it is a smile of relief or a smile of scorn. But it doesn't matter. Your mother's smile is the thing you have always wanted the most. And if this was the way you got it, then so be it. But that smile rang hollow, now devoid of any meaning, any life. An eternal reminder that mother is gone. And who's to blame for that? And yet, you bake those cookies every year, forgetting that you tried the year before because the waves of memory forces their dark underbellies to recede. And every year, you hope that they taste like how mother used to make, the penultimate. It was a bit of a shock to see Sophie again at the door on a Thursday evening during the pre-news sitcoms, because by all accounts, she was quite dead. Peter Lander distinctly recalled kissing her passionately, bittersweetly even, because it was their last kiss, and he knew it even if she didn't, right before he blew her brains out with his Colt python. He knew he was right, because Eileen made a big fuss. "Why the hell did you kiss her? She's my wife." "Not anymore." True. And given the insides of her skull, confettied all over the living room. And that later that week, they put the rest of the package 6 feet under. And then a day after that, they collected on the staggering life insurance. Yes, Sophie was dead. She had to be. And yet, "Hello, Peter," said Sophie, standing at their door. Said Peter. Dirt dribbled from her dress and hair, and actually, she was covered in dirt. No makeup, but her hair was done up, and frankly, she looked like she might just have gotten back from a rainy rugby match, which she for some reason played in her funeral dress. And maybe she was a little paler than usual. Oh, and she had that gaping hole in her forehead, of course. Sophie rolled her eyes, pushed past him, and muttered something about, "Why don't I let myself in?" Peter followed her to the kitchen, where Eileen was making herself a vodka cranberry. "Oh my God," said Eileen. Her tone was shocked, but not the kind of shocked you get when you see a dead person walking around, but rather when you see the wrong dead person walking around, like when you're in line at the express checkout, but the old guy in front has more than 10 items, and it's noisy, and the AC doesn't work, and a greasy tween elbows you in the boob and doesn't even notice, much less apologize. "Peter," What the hell? She just showed up, he said with a shrug. What do you want from me? Right, said Sophie. She placed a briefcase on the kitchen table, her lawyering briefcase from back when she was alive, and a lawyering, and unclasped it. Gather round. Family meeting time. Peter and Eileen sat, though she huffed and crossed her arms and kept the vodka at hand. Are you even part of our family anymore? Eileen asked. Sophie glared her silent. Then she pulled out piles of papers, old yellow paper, covered in horrid red ink, all over the table. Soph, Peter said. And then he winced. He never really knew how to broach deeper topics with her, which was maybe why their marriage was so-so. What's happened to you? Are you a ghost? She's obviously a zombie, Eileen snapped. I told you to use the shotgun, but did you listen? No. Sophie drew herself up and sniffed. I am not a ghost, Peter. Ghosts aren't real. Out of her briefcase, she pulled out, reverently, a ruby-red fountain pen. Except it wasn't merely ruby red, it was ruby, with a gold nib, and placed it gently beside her. Neither am I anything so gauche as a zombie, Eileen pouted. I am a revenant. Peter and Eileen shared a look. What's a revenant? He asked. I'll put it this way. When I ran into the devil in hell, told you lawyers went to hell, Eileen said, sneering. Sophie cleared her throat. When I ran into the devil, I made a deal with him. He'd let me come back as an undead murder machine so that I could wreak unholy vengeance on those who wronged me. You know, tear you limb from limb, eat your heart, and drag your sorry soul back down with me. Kind of one last big hurrah in the world of the living. Peter gulped. Eileen dropped her glass, which wobbled on the table and spilled all over her lap. Thing is, Sophie continued, holding up a parchment covered in bloody writing, I've gone over this contract hundreds of times, and as soon as I kill you, I go back too. But not until. She took a couple fresher-looking sheets of yellow paper and slid them across the table, one each for Peter and Eileen. So, I'm willing to offer you a deal. Feel free to read over that. But the gist is, I don't murder you. And in exchange, I get to live here and get access to the millions from my life insurance policy. Peter looked at his paper and gulped. Is this written in blood? It's Lucifer ink. By Lucifer ink, Sophie said. Then, with a distant look in her eyes and an unsubtle tremble, she added, Blood tends to boil down there. Oh, it is written on human leather, though. Peter and Eileen dropped their papers. What if we don't sign? Eileen asked. Then I murder you now and drag your soul down to hell. Can we just shoot you again? Peter asked. Technically, yes. But come on, Peter. Use your thinking brain. I'm already dead. Even if you managed to destroy my body by blowing it up or something, I'd just come right back, like some cheesy slasher flick. And the neighbors would probably complain about the noise. Oh, Peter and Eileen held quiet counsel for just a moment, wiggling their eyebrows and making meaningful expressions at each other. Of course, since Sophie knew them both intimately, one as a husband and the other also as a mistress, their secret language was no secret to her. She lay her ruby pen before them. "What kind of pen is that?" asked Eileen. "A pen par excellence. The pen ultimate. The devil's very own quill. Utterly binding on a soul level. I might have swiped it from his desk." "What? Don't look at me like that. It's not like I can possibly get into even more trouble." What choice did they have? They signed. Then for a second, they shimmered in a red glow and experienced a pang of bowel distress. And it was done. And Sophie moved back into the house she paid for. Her old firm wouldn't take her back when she called. "No offense, Soph. And I mean that. You were one of the best, for sure. It's just people already see us as ghoulish, and if we brought you back, well, it'd no longer be libel, would it?" So she plopped herself down on the living room couch, right in the middle, so Peter and Eileen couldn't cuddle up on it while watching a nice rom-com or something. Not that they watched rom-coms, because Sophie had control of the remote, and she binged trashy reality TV 24 hours a day. "Maybe someone else would want to watch something," Eileen said. "Maybe someone else should get a job and buy the TV," Sophie snapped. And 24 hours a day really was 24 hours a day, since Sophie didn't sleep. "You mind turning that down at night?" Peter asked, after he caught himself humming a reality theme song in the shower. "It's just, I can't sleep." "Yes, Peter," said Sophie. "I do mind." And then she cranked the volume up. The only thing that competed with the blaring TV was the shrill ding of the doorbell, going off like clockwork. Also, at all hours of the day. Having some free time, for perhaps the first time in her life, Sophie crawled the online shopping sites and splurged on whatever caught her eye. After all, her life insurance money was as much hers as anyone else's. And given this was her retirement, she had nothing to save for. The lack of responsibility felt liberating. The living room was soon filled with unread books, unworn clothes, unwatched movies, unexercised workout machines, and uneaten chocolate. Somewhere, she even found a life-size alabaster unicorn, whose horn scratched up the low ceiling. And because she refused to budge from the couch, muttering something about the sentimental value of it being the place her brain was ejected, it fell to Peter and Eileen to get the deliveries. It was exhausting in their spare moments. Peter and Eileen mostly stuck to the kitchen, where the blaring TV was at least a little muted. Having company over was difficult, because all their friends understandably kept bringing up the Sophie situation. And frankly, it was getting embarrassing explaining themselves over and over, and stressing that The living room was Sophie's room, and so it was best to leave it be. Eileen hit the bottle increasingly hard, and Peter took up smoking again. Easy, since Sophie no longer nagged him about it. "This isn't working for me," Eileen said one night. Peter nodded. "This isn't how I pictured our early retirement." Peter nodded again. "Are you listening to me?" "Christ, yes. What do you want from me?" "I want the life of luxury I was promised. I want to be able to host our friends with swanky parties." She pouted. "I want my yacht." Peter rolled his eyes. "Don't you dare," he sighed and massaged the bridge of his nose. "It's not ideal, is it? What can we do? I thought we were rid of her. Be nice." "No," said Eileen. "I'm sick of this. I wish we never signed that stupid contract." "Well, she would have murdered us. And, you know, the whole hell thing. Whatever." Then Eileen's eyes lit up. "Hey, maybe there's a loophole. Where's the contract?" Stealing Sophie's briefcase wasn't too hard. What with the TV blaring, and her attention focused entirely on the very real antics of the very real people on display. They brought it back to the kitchen for some privacy and started going through the papers. Sophie's contract with the devil was huge. It took them a solid week to go through it. A week made all the harder by the constant interruptions from deliveries. But finally, on Friday, they hit on something. Footnote 28397, Peter read. "Note that the Revenant has license to seek revenge on exactly one former aggressor. As soon as such an aggressor is slain, the Revenant contract is concluded, and both souls become the property of Lucifer Inc. Note that collateral damage is permitted." "What's that mean?" Eileen asked. "I'm reading. Hold on. Basically, if she blows us up or something, that's fine too. The contract's done when one of us dies, but there's no penalty, I guess, if we're both dead." "Super. So very encouraging." "Shh. Wait. There's more." Peter adjusted his glasses and took a drag on his cigarette. "Note also that the contract will be concluded if any of the aggressors should die by any means, whether caused by the Revenant or not. This includes, but is not limited to, traffic accidents, war, acts of God, peanut butter, old age, or being murdered by someone else." Said Eileen, setting her drink down. Said Peter. "What do you suppose that means?" "I guess," Eileen hedged, "if one of us were to die, then..." Peter set his cigarette down on the table. He locked eyes with Eileen, and neither blinked, as an ad for an energy drink roared in the background. At once, she flew at the counter, and he dived for the pantry. And they both kicked over their kitchen table. Eileen grabbed the first things available to her: a cutting board covered in raw, soon-to-be schnitzels, and a gory meat tenderizer. She flung the floppy meat patties across the room and roared, hoisting her tenderizer into the air. And then, with a shriek, brought her cutting board up, just in time to block the worst of a volley of canned pinto beans. Peter charged her with a battle cry. holding a jumbo can of tomato juice with both hands. He leapt at her, right as she swung. Her tenderizer savaged his temple, but he tackled her. "I think we should see other people," he roared, bringing his can of tomato juice down and down again. Eileen screamed, desperately blocking with her cutting board and flailing her face tenderizer, until it finally connected with his jaw. It was enough for her to push him off and then roll on top. And now Peter was on the defensive. "It's not you, it's me," she cried. And each time her weapon came down, torrents of blood, or tomato, it was hard to tell, splattered everything. They rolled again when Peter was able to get a hold of a raw schnitzel and shove it into her face. And then again, when she managed to can opener his ear. And on it went, until they both flopped onto the kitchen floor, gasping for breath, covered in cuts and bruises and meat. "Truce," he wheezed. "Yeah," she managed, and then coughed. "I thought killing was supposed to get easier after the first one." "Hey, do you smell that?" Eileen sniffed. "Is something burning?" Laboriously, they both sat up and found their kitchen to be on fire. The worst of the blaze was their table, which had been covered in Sophie's dry old contracts, Eileen's liquor, and Peter's lit cigarette. "Oh, hell," he muttered as the flames drew closer. Then they both screamed for help. Sophie ignored them at first, because their drama was just too much, and nowhere near as interesting as TV. But it grated on her enough that she finally rose off the couch. By then, the kitchen was a conflagration, with nary any raw meat in sight, neither schnitzel nor Peter and Eileen. "Damn it," she said, planting her hands on her hips. "You two are just the worst." And then she exploded into a cloud of sulfur and flame, and the house burned down. "These blades are made for woundin'." The knife whispered to him in its innocent, mouse-like voice, "Tatum." Blythe gritted his teeth and squeezed the blade's handle in a white-knuckle grip. Moisture threatened to spill over from his eyes. "No," he said. "Not now. Not tonight. Stop it. But the knife, as usual, paid him no mind. Half hidden in the reflection along the blade, the little face grinned. It giggled. Its high-pitched tones recalled the voices of untold Disney characters. Murder, Tatum, murder, killing, death, slayings, stabby, stabby, stab, stab. Tears spilling from his eyes, he began to chop the onion like a madman. Meanwhile, the blade giggled and chattered about everything it could do. Stabbing and slicing Tatum, punctured lungs, impaled hearts, slashed open bellies, sweet, juicy, beautiful blood, Tatum. Like a fountain, Tatum. Like a goddamn fountain. Tatum chopped, diced, and sliced the onion into oblivion. The recipe had asked for onion cut into cubes, and he had gone overboard. Behind Tatum, the toilet flushed. The sounds of hand washing came, and then the bathroom lock clicked open. Luella Fairchild, indeed as fair as her family name declared, stepped out. "How's the meal prep going?" she asked. He chucked the knife into the sink with a metallic clang. He grabbed a different blade from the magnetic knife rack. "Great," he said, his voice cracking. "Oh, let me handle that," Lou said, before he could stop her. She'd picked up the knife and turned the tap on. What could he say? "Don't touch that. The blade is sentient and maniacal." He'd be the one who sounded insane. She'd leave and never look back. Hell, she'd tell her friends to steer clear of him, and they'd inform their friends. He'd be alone forever. So, he watched her with the knife. He waited for a tiny voice to delight in obscenities. Luella pre-washed the knife under the tap. With the sponge, she wiped the blade clean until it glinted. And then, she placed the knife into the dishwasher. Meanwhile, the knife said nothing. She caught his gaze as she bent down to the dishwasher. A small smile touched the corner of her lips, but there was a flash of confusion, like light on a blade, in her eyes. "What?" he laughed. The sound was wild and unhinged. "Nothing. Hey, would you pass me the wine? I want to caramelize these onions. It's on the dining room table." The caution in her face softened, and her smile became more relaxed. "Sure thing. You sure do know your way around a kitchen, Tatum. I can't wait to try it. Be right back." He sighed and scrolled on his phone through the rest of the recipe. His battery was running low, so he plugged it into the charger cable he always kept on the counter. "So, the next step is to..." Half a second after Lou had left the room, the fresh knife in his hands chuckled. "Murder, Tatum. Beautiful, cold-blooded murder. Stab her in the back, Tatum, in the back. Get her in the kidneys and watch her bleed out. Gorgeous killings, Tatum. Slash, stab, and slice. No, not this one, too." Could it be that it wasn't the knives at all? That it was him? That he was the one who was insane? Tatum took the knife and threw it at the wall. He screamed, not thinking about his present company. "No!" The blade thudded into the wall with the accuracy of a circus knife thrower. It punctured the wall, pointy end first, and remained there, wobbling from the force. Behind him, Luella screamed and jumped, dropping the wine. The bottle hit the kitchen tiles and shattered. Glass fragments and splashes of wasted wine flew in all directions. That was that then. The gig was up. Lou knew he was nuts. Tatum turned to look at her. He stood there, panting, eyes wide, hair wild, madness written all over his face. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Lou. I'm so sorry. You need to leave." Hands held to her collarbone. Lou stepped around the glass and approached him. She reached for him, shaking. "Will you please tell me what's going on, Tatum?" Her voice hitched. "I can help. You need to trust me and open up. It's not good to keep this sort of thing trapped deep inside." He stammered. "I can't. Tatum, leave. Go on. Get out. Go. Now!" A heartbeat passed between them. Lou's eyes couldn't grow any wider. The world held its breath. The knives said nothing. And then the woman burst into tears and bolted from his apartment. Tatum sobbed. What was wrong with him? Had he lost it? Were the men in white coats coming to take him away? Ha! Coming to take him away? Tatum slammed the door shut. He took a step, tripped over the open dishwasher, and fell backwards. He landed on the knife Luella had cleaned and placed upright. The blade sliced through his back and penetrated out through his chest in a gout of blood. The wet metal glinted. "Yay!" "Murder!" squeaked a tiny voice. Tatum gasped as the cold hands of death squeezed his heart. He reached up for his phone on the counter. His fingers crawled like a blind spider until Tatum found it. "Lou!" he choked, blood dribbling from his mouth. "Lou?" The charger cable, still plugged in, caught around something and yanked. The knife rack toppled from the kitchen counter, spilling the knives into the air. The glinting blades twirled and plunged like Olympic divers going for gold. They punctured him and left him pin-cushioned. A choir of voices rose in ecstasy. "Yay!" He should have told Luella what was going on. He'd been too scared to speak about this madness, fearing it would drive her away. But he'd driven her away anyway, and it had resulted in his death. He shouldn't have kept it all bottled inside. Now it was too late. Tears trickled from his eyes and intermingled with the blood spilling from his mouth as he faded away. The knives wriggled inside him, giggling about death and murder. Frayed edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m., sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, But the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood. Or, more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months, along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate. in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn, the light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. Don't be stupid, he thought. Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe. He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. What is wrong with me? He wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. Why am I so on edge? Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on, as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care a jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane? There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blossomed into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. Is somebody there? He saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. No. No, no, no! He panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again. Then bang. And his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No. I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe.